Good morning, guys. I'm going to go quickly over today the topic opposite and absolute value. So the goal is I can find the opposite of an integer and the opposite of an integer, and I can find the absolute value of any integer as well. So if we look at opposites, opposites are numbers that are in the same distance from zero. And keep in mind, zero is neither positive or negative. So for instance, -2 is 2 units to the left of zero. And then therefore the opposite of that is 2 because therefore it's still 2 units to the right of zero. So this section is pretty easy. It's all about making sure you read what the question is actually asking you. So if we look at, I'm going to try my handy-dandy stuff here. If I can try to move this out of the way, maybe. I don't know. Right. So if I take the opposite of 5, well, on the other direction, what else is also 5 spaces from 0 is -5. Opposite of -89 is 89. That's a 9. And then when you talk about the opposite of a -4, that means think about -4, take the opposite of that, which is therefore a 4, and take the opposite of that, which therefore is a -4. So really, when you take two opposites, it's basically like they cancel each other out and say, don't do anything with them. So therefore, apply that same thing to the last question. Find the opposite of the, find the opposite of 30 basically means the answer is 30, because if you start with 30, take the opposite of that is -30, take the opposite of that, which is 30. So the answer here is 30. So opposites are very simple. Again, double opposites mean they're canceling out. So this is what it looks like if I wrote it with negatives. So a negative can be thought of as an opposite. So -x means take the opposite of x. So think about what I said about double negatives. So here, this really says take the opposite of a -2. That's what this means. Take the opposite of a -2, which is a 2. So in reality, these two negatives actually cancel each other out, which gives it a +2. Again, this says take the opposite of a -10, which is 10. To prove my point, these two negatives, the opposite of an opposite, really means to cancel them out. So it becomes still -10, or 10, excuse me. Okay, look at down here. This says take the opposite of 16. See how there's not another negative here? So it's just a -16. And then this says again, take the opposite of this opposite of 100 or 444, which is, there's not another negative here, so it doesn't cancel each other out. So -444. Okay. So when you have a negative, like meaning the opposite of a negative, whatever this number may be, is basically a positive. So that's something that you will see in later this year when we talk about integers. Well, we are talking about integers, but adding them. Okay, if we look at, I'm going to get to the next topic here. If you look at these balloons, and I have a couple of different balloons at different heights. And so balloon A is at +8, -10. This line right here means 0. So C is at 0, +10 and -15. Now I'm going to make this a entire page so we can actually see the questions here. So if I ask you, which two balloons are the same distance from the dashed line? That's our ultimate goal. So if you look at balloon C, C is at 0. So does it move anywhere? No, the balloon's not going up, it's not going down. So we're assuming that this line right here is 0. Okay. If we look at balloon D, it's at plus 10, right? So which direction did it go? It went up, right? Went up in the direction. So therefore, how far did it move? Well, it moved 10 feet. That's what that means. Now, if we look at balloon E, it's at negative 15. Negative 15 meant the balloon went down. But how far did that balloon move? This is where kids get a little confused about. It's not at negative 15. It went down how many spaces or how many feet? It went down 15. So looking at all these balloons, if I asked you which two balloons are the same distance, same distance from the dashed line, if you said B and D, you are correct, because this still moved 10 feet and this still tuned at 10 feet, but they just moved in different directions. So it still has the distance of 10. It's just the direction changed, the sign. Now, if we look at some of the things here where we're kind of talking about looking how far a number is from zero. So if you look at the point, if I plotted the point -2, how far is that from zero? Well, you would go 1, 2, so it's 2 spaces from zero. If I plotted the point +3, how far is +3 from zero? 1, 2, 3. It's 3 spaces from zero. So if you think about what I just did, think about the integer 7, okay? 7 is how far from zero? Well, 7 would be 7 spaces from zero. What's the opposite of 7? Well, that would be -7. But then how far would -7 be from zero? Oh, it's also 7. Opposites are the same distance from zero, right? So keep that in mind. So how far is -11 from zero? That would be 11 spaces. What's the opposite of a -11? That would be a +11. And how far is 11 from zero? 11. Same thing here. -13 is 13 from zero. The opposite of a -13 is a +13. And how far is 13 from zero? 13. So what can we conclude? Basically, if you're looking at this, what relationship do you see about the integer and the opposite and the relationship between the distance to zero? If you notice, no matter if it's positive or negative, the opposite of the integers, they are the same distance from zero. So they're the same distance from zero. So it doesn't matter if I am a +7 or a -7, I'm still 7 spaces from zero, hence the definition of an opposite. Well, what does this connect to? This connects to this fancy new word called absolute value. Absolute value is not a hard concept. It's basically the distance from zero. How far is that number from zero? Now, in absolute value, we use these bars. Okay, this is called bar notation. Bar notation is something that we will do first. It's like parentheses. It means your eyeballs go straight there and answer it. So if I look at here, this says in words, take the absolute value of 4. You just ask yourself, how far is 4 from zero? Oh, it's 4 spaces from zero. Then if I said the same thing, what's the absolute value of -4? Oh, well, -4 is still 4 spaces from zero. So 4 and -4 have the same absolute value. So when you see these bars, the bars mean how far is that number from zero? So think about it this way. Do not say that it's always positive, because I hate that. It drives me nuts. So what's the absolute value of -7? Well, -7 is 7 spaces from zero. Done. That's all you have to do here. This one, evaluate. What's the absolute value? The bars mean absolute value of 200. All you have to do is say, how far is 200 from zero? Oh, 200. Done. Done, done, done. That's all you have to do here. Okay. So therefore, what's the absolute value of 44? 44 is 44 spaces from 0. What's the absolute value of negative 60? That means it is 60 spaces from 0. So think about where it would be on a number line and how far is it from 0. Okay, now think about, let's just apply it to addition. Okay, just like when you learned, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, right? We learned that long time ago. So what does this actually mean? Well, now that we're older, this P is actually a G, in which we call grouping symbols. And in grouping symbols means you do any of those grouping symbols first. Up to this point in your life, you've only dealt with parentheses. Well, as you get a little older, you're going to have brackets, and those are what those are called. You're going to have braces, which those also mean do what's inside first. By the way, this is the order in which they kind of interlap. But if you also see absolute value, it says do what's inside of there first. So that's what we're going to do. These are now a G instead of a P. So it's called grouping symbols. They should have never used a P. It should have always been, when you're older, or I'm sorry, when you're younger, a G. Just saying. So absolute value means we need to actually evaluate, means get the answer, ask how far that number is from 0, and then do our adding and subtracting, or following basically the system here. So let's look at the first one. -9, absolute value of -9 is do what's inside of there first. So that means it's 9 spaces from 0. Absolute value of 2, that means it's 2 spaces from 0. Then I can then add it. Just like parentheses, you do what's inside of it first, absolute value, same thing. So then you're allowed to add, which is 11. Okay, let's look at the next one. Absolute value of 17. Those are like grouping symbols, like parentheses, do them first. That means it's 17 spaces from 0. Absolute value of -3. -3 is 3 spaces from 0. So therefore, all I have to do is bring down my subtraction sign, and then I am allowed to subtract. And the answer is 14. But what if I had a problem like this? What would we do first here? Okay, so we say absolute value is like do what's inside of there first. Okay, so we need to do what's inside of here first, right? So since this both is inside of the absolute value, we need to subtract first. Subtract first. So that's 2, because they're both inside, right? Then bring down your absolute value sign, because just like when you did parentheses, right, we would do 7 plus 2 and say there was a 3 out here. You would do this and then you would multiply, right? So you bring it down. So then I ask, how far is 2 from 0? Take the absolute value of 2, which is 2. So this is a two-stepper, just like the other one. Here, do what's inside the absolute value first. So I'm going to add, which is 17. But then I need to bring down my absolute value. So then I ask, how far is 17 from 0? 17. Okay, there's a slight difference between these two. See how these two are separated? These two are separated, where these ones are together inside of the absolute value. Okay, so I've done a quick comparing and or trying to figure out which one's bigger, which one's smaller. Same thing, we're going to use an inequality sign. So remember, that's less than, greater than, or equal to. As we get further on, we're going to see these two symbols. So I'm going to do the same thing, comparing them. So what's the absolute value of -7? That'd be 7. What's the absolute value of 8? 8. 8 spaces, 7 spaces. So what would be our symbol? Well, 7 is smaller than 8. So my symbol would be this one, less than. And I do 1 dot versus 2 dots, so if that helps you find. Okay, let's look at the next one. Absolute value of 81 is 81. Absolute value of -81 is also 81. They're both 81 spaces from 0. So these are equivalent. Got a couple different ones down here. See if we can do these. Absolute value of -3 is 3. Absolute value of -5 is 5 spaces from 0. 3 is less than 5. Okay, let's go to this one. Oh, that is not brackets. I'm sorry, that's not bars, right? So what does this say? This says take the opposite of a -6, which is 6. So I have a 6 here. Or if you remember, opposite of a negative is basically meaning don't cross them out. They basically, you're left with just the number. Okay. This is 6, but this has nothing around it, right? So we don't do anything with it. We just bring it down. So we're comparing 6 versus -6. Well, -6 is smaller than 6. Positives are bigger than negatives. So there you go. The answer is done. Okay, just a few more here. This says take the opposite of a -5, which is 5, versus the opposite of 7, which is -7. Again, see how these are double negatives and they're parentheses, meaning take the opposite of a negative. So again, positives are bigger than negatives. Last one, there's nothing around this, so I leave it alone. But this one I threw in there just to see if you could catch on to it. What if I had absolute value, right? But then I got a negative on the outside. Wait. We know that a negative on the outside means opposite. So this really means in words, take the opposite of the absolute value of 73. Oopsies. Well, ask yourself, how far is 73 from 0? Okay, 73. So what's the opposite of this? -73, right? So it's just basically saying, let me write it again. Find the answer of this, right? Do what's inside the grouping symbols first. So that's 73. And then just tag Mr. Negative along. So the answer here, final answer, is that these are equal. So just to prove my point for this one, again, apply what we just did. If I tell you to have the absolute value of 43, but the negatives on the outside, so that would be take 43. How far is 43 from 0? 43. And then take the opposite of that. So just basically, the answer is -43. So same thing here. What's the absolute value of -78? That's 78. We're doing inside of the grouping symbols or the bar notation first, bars. And then all we do is take the opposite of that, which is a -78. So the only way absolute value would be negative, like your final answer, is if the negative is on the outside, or what you add and subtract in the middle. It would not be any other way other than if the negative is outside of your grouping symbols, in this case, absolute value. Okay. All right. I had some practice problems, but I'm going to skip over that because I do need to just kind of go over just a few word problems. Okay. And this is part that is kind of really, really important. So just before I get to the word problems, let's think about this. What is the distance between these numbers? So thinking about the distance between 6 would be somewhere over here, 0 would be somewhere here, and -1 would be right here, right? What's the distance between those? Well, how far is -1 from 0? Well, that would be 1 space, right? How far is 6 from 0? 6 spaces. So what is the total distance between the two? It is 7. 1 plus 6 is 7. So think about what I just did, and let's do it again. Here's -2. Oopsies. 0 somewhere here. 10's all the way down here. Okay, is that perfect? No, it's not perfect, but we get the idea. How far is -2 from 0? 2. How far is 10 from 0? 10. So 2 plus 10 is 12. 12 spaces. So if you notice what I'm doing, all I'm doing is taking the absolute value of this and then add the absolute value of that, absolute value of this, and absolute value of that. That tells you the distance between those integers. But what if they're both negative? All right, well, 0's here, right? -1 would be here, and then somewhere further down the line, -5's here. How many spaces are between both of these that are negative? They're both negative. Well, -5, then this would be like -4, then this would be -3, then -2, then -1. So how far is in between those two numbers? This time, it's a little different, right? I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 spaces. So basically, you're just taking your two numbers since they're on that one side, and basically I just took 5 minus 1, which gave me 4. It's the distance between those two, right? Distance between meaning kind of like subtraction in a sense. Same thing here. If I had -4, then -3, then -2, then -1, and then 0 some here. If I asked you what's the distance between these two, I have 1, 2, 3, 3 spaces. So it's 4 minus 1 to get me 3. So what kind of rules do you see? So here's the rule, okay? If your integers are on different sides, you basically add them, right? Add the absolute value. However, when they're on the same side, see how these are both on the same side of 0? You subtract the absolute value, okay? So keep that in mind. So if I asked you to find the distance between a -7 and a +3, they're on different sides, right? So you would add, and this would be 10. If I had the distance between a -8 and a -4, I would subtract. And it's 4 spaces. I'm just saying spaces, not, these answers won't be technically a negative or positive in this case, just how many spaces in between. So just to get to these problems here. So let's say, excuse me, Jason spent $18, so -18, right? And then he spent 24, so -24. What is the total amount that he spent? So he spent 18 and he spent 24. So he spent, meaning negative, right, in this case. But all we have to do is just add those, right? 24 plus 18 is 42. So he spent $42 in this case. Spent and spent, we just put together. So he spent, which is really a negative, but we're just say spent $42. Now, I'm gonna be careful in these ones. Okay. My team starts on the 10-yard line. So we're somewhere here, 10 yards, right? Okay. Then we lost 2 yards on the play. So lost, meaning we lost 2 yards. So we went back 2. So where are we at now? We are at 8 yards, right? So now we're here at 8 yards. Then on the second play, we gained 15 yards. So we gained 15. So if I add 15 to that, I would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I end up being at 23 yards. So what yard line are we at now? We're at 23 yards. Now, what would this look at as a expression? It's basically I was at 10, and then I lost 2 yards, and then I gained 15. That's what that would look like. Or sometimes kids write it like this. I have 10, and then I lost 2, and then I gained 15. You also could write it that way as well. Okay, now think about this one. I'm in a part of the cave with a large boulder 5 feet below the surface. So I'm below the surface. I travel to another part of the cave that has a stalactite that is at 15 feet below the surface. What's the distance between the boulder and the stalactite? So we're both below the surface, right? Think about how we did that. These would both be on the same side of 0. So here's the surface. One of the boulders is 5 feet below, right? Here's the boulder. Beautiful boulder. But then further down is your stalactite, which I think these are the ones that hang from the ceiling. So how far is 5 and 15? Well, we're both below the surface, right? So how many spaces would be in between these two? Would we add those or would we subtract those? Hopefully you said subtract. You're right. 15 minus 5, we would have 10. There's basically 10 yards. I think that's what the problem had. Oh, sorry, excuse me. 10 feet below the surface. So that's how many spaces, because it would be -5, -6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So there would be 5 or 10 little loops there. But anyways, best strategy here is draw a picture. Draw a picture. Okay. Okay, real quick here, I'm just going to show what it looks like here. So I have money in the bank, 200 bucks. I deposited 60. Direct deposit. When you become an adult, you get a paycheck. It's typically direct deposit. It means I put money in my bank. So add 60. But then we went some shopping and we spent $75. So if I spend money, I take that money out. And so then I would subtract 75. So how much do I have in the bank account now? So we go left to right, right? Adding and subtracting left to right. So 200, I put 60 in the bank, so that's 260. But then I spent 75. So that means I take that out. So you should be at 195. Let me double check. I think I did it right. Nope. 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 I did it wrong. 185. See? Gotta check myself. Gotta check myself. 185. So how much do I have in my bank account? I have $185 now. Okay. So it's all about making sure you read the words in front of it. Last but not least, I have, these are the ones that kids miss all the time. Draw a picture. I got a little jellyfish, 6 feet below sea level. So negative, right? So I'm at -6. And then she saw a bright blue fish at 10 feet below sea level. Oh, well, they're both below. So here's the surface. We got Mr. Jellyfish at -6. Jellyfish, jellyfish. And then flow, we got a bright blue starfish. Oh, isn't that perfect? Look at those gills. Okay, at -10. So how many spaces are in between here? This one's easy. They're both below, so you would subtract. There's 4. Okay, now, this one, be careful. This is the number 1 question that is missed. I lied. I thought that was the last one. It's actually this one. So at the top of diving board. Oh, I'm on a diving board. Okay. There's the water. Here I am. About to dive. Oh, I look beautiful, don't I? I'm at 10 feet. Okay. Oh, he dives. Goes down. and he's now below. So above, so at a positive 10, right? And below at a negative 7. So we were at 10, and now we're at negative 7. So down here, we're at negative 7 feet. This is where he ends up at. How far did the boy travel? So in this case, we want to know, what is the distance between the two here? Think about this as sea level. One's a positive, one's a negative. We did this at the beginning. So how far is 10 from the water? How far is 10 from the water? 10 spaces, right? 10 feet. And then at the water, then he went below the surface, negative 7 feet. So that's 7 feet. So how far did he travel? 10 and 7. He traveled a total of 17 feet. You do not have to say negative 17. That's not what I'm asking. Just said how far he went. Okay, distance. Distance does not necessarily indicate I'm not negative or positive. Direction would do that for you. Last one. Okay. If I owe the bank $5, ooh, that's not good. You don't want to overdraft your account. It means I owe them. I'm below my account balance. And now I have a balance of $10 in the account. Oh, now I have $10. How much did I deposit? That means how much did I put in that bank account in order to have an account balance? Two common answers I get is 5 or 15. So if I'm at negative 5 and I need to go all the way to 10, I have to pass 0, right? What's the answer? Well, ask yourself, how far is negative 5 from 0? I got to put $5 in the bank. And then I got to put another, to get to 10, I got to get another 10. So how much did I put in the bank? 5 and 10 makes 15. Okay. So again, it's all about keeping the keywords. Above, below, right? Above and below. What's the distance between above, below, seagull, person, 15 below, 20 above. What do we end up doing is we end up adding these, kind of like absolute value, because one's in the positive, one's in the negative, so we put them together. So 35. Okay. All right. Pretty much that's it. I have other questions here, like which one has the greatest absolute value? Again, it's all about making sure you read the question, reading the question, reading the question. I had some more questions here and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So go ahead and work on the assignment, and I shall see you tomorrow. Have a good one.